Keir Starmer is not coming out in support of the strikes. The Labour leader has not said he backs them. He has also banned his MPs from joining the picket line. Is that something that you think a Labour leader should be doing? If Labour doesn't stand for quite literally Labour, working people, what does it stand for? Or can it do that without supporting the widespread disruption that these unions have caused today? Keir Starmer's so clear on this position that in the last hour or so, he sacked one of his shadow ministers, Sam Tarry, a transport minister, who joined the picket line in London this morning. Now, just before we came on air, I spoke to Sam Tarry, he's also the Labour MP for Ilford South, about the conversation he'd had with Keir Starmer. Sam, you've been sacked from Labour's front bench this evening. You've been sacked from your role as a shadow transport minister. What happened? Did Keir Starmer call you personally? How did you find out?
I had a constructive conversation with Alan Campbell, who I say has always been very supportive and very helpful to me as a front bencher, and then spoke to Keir, and we had a forthright and constructive exchange of views.
What did Keir Starmer say to you?
Look, it wouldn't be fair for me to go into that conversation, but obviously from his point of view, he thought that, I'd overstepped the mark, I'd broken the kind of collective positions that he wanted to agree. I put a different view forward, as you might imagine.
And this was because you joined the picket line and the RMT strike this morning?
As the RMT and TSSA, I was a former trade union officer with the TSSA, so people I knew and known for many, many years were on strike today, ticket office staff. So for me, it was going to be very difficult to avoid this one. I think that, the Labour Party is born out of the trade union movement, and if we're not able to show solidarity and constructive dialogue with trade unions, then I think we have a real problem. The reality is that, the country is going to become almost ungovernable over the next sort of 6 to 8 months as industrial disputes just break out all over, from barristers to doctors to nurses to lecturers. The reality is if we had a Labour government, that wouldn't be happening. We would be able to actually be on a table with trade unions, have proper constructive discussions, and actually have an economic agenda that means that people aren't suffering in terms of low pay in the way that they are. Because, look, there's a lot of myths often put out in the media about, sort of striking rail workers. The reality is that most of the workers today, if they're in ticket offices, so TSSA staff, probably on £25,000, perhaps even less in some sort of train operating companies, and RMT, the track maintenance staff and the safety critical staff, again, £25,000 to £30,000. These are not massive sums of money, decent wages, sure, but they're not huge sums of money by any stretch of imagination. So for these people to choose to have, foregone a day's pay, and to do on several occasions, these are people who will also be struggling like every other person is in the country to put food on the table, to pay their energy bills, and to, fill up the fuel to go into a car.
Keir Starmer says Labour needs to look like a government, your party needs to look like a government in waiting, and that people in government don't go and stand on picket lines. Do you see where he's coming from on this? He's got a point.
I think people in government do, because if we were in government, we would be sitting around that table, whether it be with Network Rail, whether it be with the train operating companies, as Grant Shapps full well knows, we would be saying, look, these are the parameters, these are the flexibilities you can have to come to a negotiated settlement. So we wouldn't need to be on the picket lines, because the picket lines wouldn't be taking place. I think it's wrong to say that any Labour politician, whether it be a councillor, whether it be an MP, whether it be a shadow minister, shouldn't be showing solidarity. And I think that we're going to see that hit breaking point over the next few months, as many other MPs who come from trade union backgrounds and represent, not just constituencies, but constituencies of support more broadly in the country, are going to be faced with a choice of doing nothing, saying nothing, or backing the people that they are, really kind of, I suppose, responsible in some ways for having supported them into Parliament to represent collective views of the trade union movement. And I think that if this isn't tackled properly, there's going to be a real danger that it won't just be me that's sacked. I think you'll see dozens and dozens of shadow ministers sacked across the whole country. Absolutely.
How upset, how angry are some of your colleagues about the position that your party
I've just fielded phone calls from 7 different general secretaries, all Labour affiliated, one not Labour affiliated. Those general secretaries are absolutely fuming about what has happened today. They are now on direct collision course with the Labour Party leadership, and that was totally avoidable. Many of my colleagues from many different wings of the party are supporters of the trade union movement. There have been a mixture of views about whether or not we should have been on the picket lines today or not, but all of them would fully understand that collectivism, in terms of the values that we have as Labour Party MPs, means standing in solidarity with people, particularly low-paid workers who are really suffering. I mean, look, we've also had, over the past few weeks, the real kind of climate crisis coming to a crunch. The fires that are breaking out across Europe. In my neighbouring constituency, John Cruddas' seat, a whole range of houses were burnt to the ground, all because we haven't had any rain in London for the best part of 2 months. We can't credibly say we want to form a government if we don't have a plan to tackle the climate crisis. Tackling the climate crisis means getting people out of planes and onto trains, out of private vehicles, stopping and put fuel in the petrol pump and onto public transport. And we need a credible plan to do that. Now, I've advocated a credible plan for that. This past week, we couldn't even be clear about our public ownership plans, whether it be for municipal buses or for rail.
So your issue with Keir Starmer is not limited to these strikes. You think he's got it wrong across the board on issues like rail nationalisation?
Well, actually, Keir Starmer agrees with me on rail nationalisation, and that is the current Labour Party policy.
That's what he said this week.
He had to come out and correct himself and say that was actually the Labour Party policy. And, you can confirm that with my former boss, Louise Hay. It very much is still Labour Party policy because it's a pragmatic, common sense policy. How on earth are we in a situation when rail companies are not even able to offer to striking workers not even able to match inflation? So in reality, what workers have been offered is a pay cut, essentially. At the same time as saying to them, well, OK, hold on. You've got two Conservative leadership candidates who are hell-bent on destroying 200 years of workplace rights that have been accrued in this country. We're not able to turn around and say, actually, we are going to stand in solidarity with you. This is clearly wrong. What's going on is wrong. And come out and say, as I did today, that if we were in government, these disputes wouldn't be taking place.
What did you say, Sam, when you spoke to Keir Starmer today? Were these the points you were making to him? What did you say to him?
I had a very good exchange with Keir Starmer. I won't go into detail. It was a private conversation. It wouldn't be fair of me to relay that. Of course, I made my views very clear. I made my sort of concern over a number of issues very clear. Remember, I'm the longest-serving Shadow Minister from the 2019 intake. I pretty much served continuously since first becoming an MP, and for over 2 years in this current position until today as the Shadow Transport Minister. And so, Keir respects me, he respects the work I've done, knows that I've been an asset to the party, and I think that, we had an amicable and constructive but frank exchange of views.
It doesn't sound like you respect him particularly as a leader, if I may say so.
I'm a Labour Party loyalist. I've stood in elected positions under 4 Labour Party leaders, including Keir Starmer. I'll be doing everything I can from this day onwards to make sure he is the next Labour Prime Minister.
Do you think he's doing a good job?
I think he's doing the best job that he can.
Is he doing a good job?
I think he's doing the best job that he can.
Should we take that as a no, sir?
No, because it's not about no, but I think that any leader makes mistakes at different points, of course that they do, but I think that this could have been handled in a far better way. I think we're now going to see, across the Labour Party, an awful lot of anger about what's gone on today. It was avoidable, it was unnecessary. I'm someone that can pick up the phone to different trade union leaders. I wanted to help Keir get to a position where this sort of thing was not going to be happening. There are ways of showing your support for the trade union movement without necessarily having to even join a picket line. Of course it's great, but by creating a red line where it says you choose the movement from which you come or you choose me, that is an impossible position to be left in.
Why do you think he has done this? Why has he sacked you? Why has he stopped Labour MPs going to join the picket line? What's behind it all, in your view?
I think that there's a misunderstanding about what solidarity means. I think that there is a strategy which I believe is wrong, which says you're not able to do these things and to enter government. I don't believe that's the case at all. I'm the first MP in Labour Party history to ever be sacked for joining a picket line. We've won government many times over the last 100 years, not as much as I would like, but this wouldn't have happened under Tony Blair. I'm pretty sure of that.
You think it wouldn't have happened under Tony Blair?
No, I think Tony Blair had a difficult, fractious, but sometimes constructive relationship with the trade unions. You have to remember some of the things that were brought in negotiation under the last Labour government with trade unions, including the national minimum wage, for example. It was very much a TUC policy.
Do you think Keir Starmer's got a worse relationship with the trade unions than Tony Blair did?
I think far worse. I think that there is a complete lack of dialogue, a complete lack of understanding, a complete lack of culture. And I think that, that is really hamstringing his leadership. And I want to see him win the next election. I've been serving loyally and working as hard as I possibly can to develop those policies and to make sure we've got an election-winning platform. I'll continue to support as best I can from the back benches, but we have to get this right. The Labour Party is just not MPs. It is a wider movement of people across the country, and that's what makes us so different from Conservatives, because when we're in power, the whole country is going into power, not just an elite. This is actually about a movement of people and the policies that we have that are born out of that.
Sam, thank you. Pretty stunning there to hear Sam Tarry, Labour MP for Ilford South, until an hour or so ago, a shadow transport minister in Keir Starmer's team, claim that Keir Starmer has a worse relationship with the trade unions than even Tony Blair did.